The unexpected encounter. Natalie Brooks adjusted the straps of her emerald dress for the third time in 5 minutes. The Roosevelt Hotel ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and Manhattan's elite, and she felt completely out of place. Her best friend Riley had convinced her to attend this charity gala, promising it would be good for networking. What Riley failed to mention was that Natalie's ex-fiancé might show up. The champagne tasted expensive on her tongue as she surveyed the crowd. Marketing coordinators didn't usually attend events like this, but her company had bought a table. She was trying to look confident when she heard a voice that made her freeze mid-sip. Natalie. Natalie Brooks. She turned slowly, hoping she was wrong. She wasn't. Brandon Walsh stood 10 feet away, his trademark smile plastered across his face. Next to him was a woman who looked like she'd walked off a magazine cover, all legs and perfect hair. 2 years. It had been 2 years since Brandon had called off their engagement 3 weeks before the wedding. Not via text, thankfully, but through a phone call where he explained he wasn't ready for commitment. The excuse had felt hollow then and felt even worse now. Seeing him with commitment written all over his face for someone else. The desperate decision, Brandon. Natalie managed, forcing brightness into her voice. What a surprise. You look amazing, he said, walking over with the magazine woman attached to his arm. This is Amber? Amber, this is Natalie. We used to date. As if their 3-year relationship and planned wedding could be summarized so casually. Nice to meet you, Amber said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Brandon mentioned you worked in marketing. That must be so fulfilling. The condescension dripped like honey. Natalie's fingers tightened around her champagne flute. So are you here alone? Brandon asked, his eyes scanning behind her as if expecting someone to appear. I always worried about whether you'd be able to move on. The words hit like a slap. Worried about her? As if she was some broken thing he'd left behind, unable to function without him. Actually, Natalie heard herself say, I'm here with my husband. The lie exploded out of her mouth before her brain could stop it. Brandon's eyebrows shot up. Amber's perfectly glossed lips formed a surprised circle. Husband? Brandon repeated. You got married? Natalie's heart hammered. What had she just done? Yes, recently. Very private ceremony. Who's the lucky guy? Amber asked, leaning forward with predatory curiosity. Panic flooded Natalie's system. She needed a man. Any man. Her eyes frantically scanned the ballroom, landing on a figure standing alone near the floor-to-ceiling windows. Tall, dark-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. He looked bored and slightly irritated, checking his phone with the air of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. Perfect. Him. Natalie pointed before she could reconsider. That's Derek. My husband, Derek Hamilton. Brandon followed her finger, and his jaw literally dropped. Derek Hamilton. The Derek Hamilton from Hamilton Technologies? The billionaire's surprised Natalie had no idea who Derek Hamilton was. But from Brandon's reaction, he was someone important. Very important? You married Derek Hamilton? Amber's voice had gone up an octave. The billionaire who just made Forbes' top 50 under 40 list? Oh no. Oh no, no, no. Natalie had just claimed to be married to an actual billionaire. This was so much worse than she'd imagined. Yes, she said weakly. We've been together for a while. Very low-key relationship. I have to meet him, Brandon said, already waving enthusiastically. Derek Hamilton. The man by the windows looked up, confusion crossing his handsome features. He glanced around, clearly wondering who was calling him. Brandon waved more enthusiastically and slowly, reluctantly. The man started walking toward them. Natalie felt her legs turn to water. This was it. Her lie was about to explode spectacularly in front of her ex-fiancé and his perfect girlfriend. She'd be humiliated all over again, just like when Brandon had ended their engagement. 10 seconds until impact. The man was getting closer, his gray eyes taking in the scene with sharp intelligence. 5 seconds. She could see the exact moment he recognized something was wrong. 3 seconds. His mouth opened, probably to ask what was happening. 2 seconds. Brandon was grinning like he'd won the lottery. 1 second. Natalie made a decision. She launched herself at the stranger, wrapping her arms around him in what she hoped looked like an enthusiastic embrace. His body went rigid with shock, solid and warm against her. "Sweetheart," she practically shouted against his expensive-smelling chest. "I missed you so much." She whispered frantically in his ear, "Please, I'm begging you. Just play along for 5 minutes. I'll explain everything, please." The unexpected alliance, there was a moment of absolute silence. Natalie could feel the stranger's heartbeat against her cheek, fast and hard. She waited for him to push her away, to call her crazy, to ruin everything. Then miraculously, his arms came around her, slowly, carefully, but they were there.
"Natalie,"
he said, his voice deep and measured. "Darling." She nearly collapsed with relief. When they separated, she kept one hand on his arm, partly for show, partly because her knees had stopped working properly. Brandon, the stranger Derek, extended his hand with a polite smile. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Hamilton. This is such an honor." Brandon shook his hand with both hands, practically vibrating with excitement. "I'm Brandon Walsh with Walsh Properties. My father's company works with several tech firms in the area," of course Derek said smoothly, though it was clear he had no idea who Brandon was. "And this is my fiancée, Amber Knight," Brandon continued. Pulling Amber forward, "Congratulations," Derek said with zero enthusiasm. His hand found Natalie's waist, large and warm and commanding. She tried not to visibly react. Amber was staring at them with narrowed eyes. "I had no idea you were married, Natalie. When did this happen?" "Last month," Natalie said at the same time Derek said, 6 weeks ago." They looked at each other. Derek's eyes held a glint of something. Amusement, maybe. Or irritation. Possibly both. 6 weeks feels like last month when you're in love, Natalie added quickly. "Time flies," Derek agreed, pulling her closer. "Though I remember every detail of our wedding day." "As do I," Natalie said. Having absolutely no details to remember, Brandon looked between them. And for a second, Natalie saw something flash across his face. Regret? Jealousy? Whatever it was, it felt like vindication. "The complication begins. We should do dinner sometime," Brandon suggested. "The 4 of us. I'd love to catch up properly, and I'm sure our fathers would be interested in connecting, Mr. Hamilton." "Please call me Derek," he said, though his jaw had tightened slightly. "And dinner sounds wonderful, but Natalie and I are actually leaving for Europe tomorrow. Business trip combined with a delayed honeymoon." Natalie's eyes widened. "Europe tomorrow?" "That's too bad," Amber said, though she looked relieved. "Maybe when you return?" "Absolutely," Derek said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. A photographer circulated nearby, capturing candid moments of the gala. Before Natalie could react, a flash went off, catching her and Derek standing close together, his arm around her waist, looking for all the world like a couple deeply in love. "Beautiful," the photographer said. Moving on to the next group, Derek's phone immediately started buzzing in his pocket. He ignored it, but Natalie could see tension building in his shoulders. "We should let you to mingle," Natalie said quickly, suddenly desperate to escape. "Lots of people to see tonight," of course Brandon said, but he was still staring at Derek with starstruck admiration. "It was great seeing you, Nat. You look really happy." For the first time in 2 years of imagining this encounter, Natalie realized she didn't care what Brandon thought. She just needed to get away before this charade fell apart. "Come on, darling," Derek said, his hand sliding to the small of her back. "I believe they're about to start the auction." He guided her away from Brandon and Amber with practiced ease. The moment they were out of earshot, his pleasant expression vanished. "Conference room," he said quietly. "3rd floor. 5 minutes. We need to talk." Then he released her and walked away, leaving Natalie standing alone in the middle of the ballroom. Wearing a dead woman's engagement ring, she hadn't noticed him slip onto her finger, and wondering how a simple lie had snowballed into the most complicated situation of her life, her phone buzzed. A text from Riley. "Did you just hug Derek Hamilton? It's all over social media already." "Girl, what is happening?" Natalie looked down at the stunning vintage diamond on her left hand, then at Derek's retreating figure cutting through the crowd. What was happening indeed? She had 5 minutes to figure out how to explain herself to a billionaire she'd just dragged into an elaborate lie. 5 minutes to convince him not to expose her as a fraud in front of everyone who mattered in Manhattan society. 5 minutes before her impulsive decision either became the biggest mistake of her life or something else entirely. Natalie took a deep breath, downed the rest of her champagne, and headed for the elevator. Time to face the consequences of hugging a stranger to make her jealous. Though something told her Derek Hamilton wasn't the type to let consequences slide easily. The conference room confession, the third-floor conference room, was empty and cold, all glass walls and leather chairs. Natalie paced nervously, her heels clicking against the polished floor. The door opened, and Derek walked in, closing it firmly behind him. He leaned against the door, arms crossed, studying her with those intense gray eyes. Up close, he was even more intimidating. Sharp jawline, perfectly styled dark hair, and an expression that suggested he was used to having all the answers. "Explain," he said simply. Natalie stopped pacing. I panicked, clearly. "Keep going. Brandon, the guy down there. He's my ex-fiancé. He ended our engagement 2 years ago, 3 weeks before our wedding. Said he wasn't ready for commitment." The words tumbled out in a rush. "Tonight was the first time I've seen him since, and he shows up with that perfect girlfriend. Asking if I've moved on like I'm some sad project he left unfinished." Derek's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "So I lied," Natalie continued. "I said I was married. Then he asked who, and you were standing there looking all brooding and billionaire-like. And my mouth just made executive decisions my brain wasn't part of." "Brooding and billionaire-like," Derek repeated, the corner of his mouth twitching. "Is that really what you're focusing on right now?" "It's an interesting description." Pushed off the door, walking closer. "So you dragged me into your elaborate revenge plot without asking." "It wasn't a revenge plot. It was survival instinct." Natalie held up her hand, suddenly noticing the ring. "Where did this come from?" "My grandmother. I keep it in my jacket pocket." He saw her expression. "Long story. The point is, you've created a situation that could damage both our reputations if it falls apart publicly." "I'm sorry. I'll fix it." Natalie started pulling at the ring. "I'll tell Brandon tomorrow that we broke up, or got divorced, or that you died in a tragic accident." "A tragic accident? Too dramatic?" "Slightly." Derek caught her hand, stopping her from removing the ring. His touch was warm, his fingers gentle, despite his stern expression. "Leave it. Taking it off now would raise more questions. So what do we do?" Derek was quiet for a long moment, his thumb absently brushing over her knuckles. "My company is finalizing a major merger. The board has concerns about my personal life, thinks I'm too focused on work. A stable marriage would actually help." Natalie's eyes widened. "You want to keep pretending?" "Temporarily. There's a corporate retreat this weekend in the Berkshires. Board members, investors, their spouses. If I show up with a wife, it solves several problems." "You want me to be your fake wife for a business weekend? You got me into this? The least you can do is help me out." His eyes met hers, and there was a challenge there. "Unless you'd rather I tell everyone downstairs the truth right now," Natalie imagined Brandon's smug face, Amber's delighted mockery. No, I'll do it. One weekend. Good." Derek released her hand and pulled out his phone. "We need to coordinate our story." "How did we meet?" "Building the lie over the next hour, they constructed their fictional relationship. They'd met at a charity auction 18 months ago. First date was coffee, simple and low-key. Derek had proposed during a private dinner at his penthouse. The wedding was intimate, just immediate family at a courthouse because they valued privacy over spectacle. "What about the ring?" Natalie asked, looking at the diamond on her finger. "Won't people question why I'm wearing your grandmother's ring if this is fake? It's the most believable option. Family heirlooms don't raise eyebrows." "Newly purchased rings do?" Stood straightening his jacket. "My assistant Grace will contact you tomorrow. She'll help with wardrobe and background details." "Wardrobe?" "The retreat is business formal. You'll need appropriate attire. Natalie bristled. I can dress myself. I'm sure you can. But the people attending this retreat will notice every detail. Let Grace help. Consider it part of the arrangement. He headed for the door, then paused. One more thing. We should exchange numbers. Married couples tend to have each other's contact information. They swapped phones, entering their numbers. When Derek handed hers back, she saw he'd listed himself as husband fake. Really? She said. Accuracy matters. But there was a hint of amusement in his voice. The media stormed by morning. Natalie's phone was exploding. The photo from the gala had gone viral. Every gossip site in New York was running stories about Derek Hamilton's secret marriage. Her social media was flooded with messages from people she hadn't talked to in years. Riley showed up at her apartment at 8 a.m. with coffee and bagels and a look that demanded answers. Start talking, Riley said, settling onto the couch. And don't leave anything out. Natalie told her everything. By the end, Riley was shaking her head in disbelief. Only you could accidentally fake marry a billionaire. I didn't mean to. No one means to. It just happens. Riley bit into her bagel. So what now? Now I survive a weekend in the Berkshires, pretending to be in love with a man I barely know. I could actually fall for him. Absolutely not. We have rules. What rules? We haven't made them yet, but we will. And rule number 1 will definitely be no real feelings. Riley gave her a look. Famous last words. The practice date Derek texted that afternoon. Dinner tonight. We need to practice being married. Natalie stared at the message. Practice being married. Who did that? Apparently, meticulous billionaires who left nothing to chance. He picked her up at 7 in a sleek black car. He wore dark jeans and a gray sweater that made his eyes look like storm clouds. Natalie had changed outfits 4 times before settling on a navy dress that Riley approved. You look nice, Derek said as she slid into the car. You look not terrible, his lips quirked. I'll take it. They went to a quiet Italian restaurant in Brooklyn, tucked away from Manhattan's prying eyes. Over pasta and wine, they filled in more details of their fictional life together. Favorite thing about me? Derek asked, twirling linguine on his fork. Your humility, Natalie said dryly. Seriously? People will ask. She thought about it. Your directness. You don't play games. You say what you mean. Something shifted in his expression. Favorite thing about you is your courage. You take risks, even when they scare you. Is that a compliment or a criticism of my life choices? Both. He smiled, and it transformed his whole face, softened the sharp edges. It made him look younger and less intimidating. Natalie's stomach did a little flip. Dangerous. It was dangerous. Tell me something real, she said, trying to shift the mood. Not backstory. Just you. Derek set down his fork. I built Hamilton Technologies from nothing. Started in my college dorm room, coding 18 hours a day. Everyone said I'd fail. Paused. Sometimes I feel like I'm still that kid, trying to prove he deserves to be in the room with the adults. The vulnerability in his voice caught Natalie off guard. You've more than proven yourself, have I? Or have I just gotten good at faking confidence? Maybe we're all just faking it until we make it. Like fake marriages. His eyes held hers. Exactly like that. Shared tiramisu for dessert. Their forks occasionally colliding as they both went for the same bite. Derek insisted on paying, despite Natalie's protests. Husbands pay for dinner, he said. Fake husbands can split the check. Not this one, I guess. They walked back to the car. Derek's hand found hers naturally. His fingers laced through hers like they'd done it 1,000 times. It felt right. Easy. Terrifying. The blackmail begins that night. Natalie was getting ready for bed when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. Then curiosity won. The message was a photo. Her and Derek at the restaurant, visible through the window. Below it, cute couple. Shame if people found out the truth. Call me. Natalie's blood went cold. Someone knew. Someone had followed them and knew their marriage was fake. Her phone rang. Derek, did you get a message? He asked without preamble. Yes. How did you know? I got one too. Different photo, same threat. His voice was tight with controlled anger. Don't respond. Don't call the number. I'm handling it. Handling it how? I have people who deal with this sort of thing. Someone's trying to blackmail us, and they picked the wrong target. Despite the situation, Natalie felt oddly reassured by his confidence. What do? We stick to the plan. Go to the Berkshires this weekend, act like newlyweds, and let my security team figure out who's behind this. Derek, maybe we should just come clean and let some anonymous blackmailer win. Not happening, was steel in his voice. Besides, I don't back down from threats. And neither should you. He was right. She'd spent 2 years letting Brandon's rejection define her. Maybe it was time to stop running from complicated situations. Okay, she said. We do this together. Together, he agreed, and something about the way he said it made her heart skip. The weekend begins Friday morning. Derek's car picked up Natalie at dawn. Her small suitcase looked pathetic next to the designer luggage already in the trunk. Grace had sent over 3 garment bags of clothes, all perfectly tailored to Natalie's size. She didn't want to know how Derek's assistant had gotten her measurements. The drive to the Berkshires took 3 hours. Derek spent most of it on conference calls, but occasionally he'd reach over and take her hand, his thumb brushing her knuckles absently. While he talked about market shares and profit margins, it felt domestic, comfortable, real. The resort was stunning. All rustic luxury nestled in autumn mountains. Their suite had a fireplace, a massive bed, and windows overlooking a private lake. One bed. They both stared at it. I can take the couch, Derek offered. The staff will think that's weird. True. He ran a hand through his hair. We're adults. We can share a bed platonically. Absolutely. Very platonic. Neither of them moved. I sleep on the left side, Natalie said. So do I. We can't both sleep on the left. Then one of us has to compromise. We looked at each other. Despite the tension, Natalie started laughing. This is ridiculous. Completely ridiculous. Derek smiled. I'll take the right side, really. Really? But I'm not happy about it, noted. The performance that evening's welcome cocktail party was Natalie's first real test. She wore a burgundy dress that hugged her curves, courtesy of Grace's impeccable styling. Derek appeared in a tailored charcoal suit, and when he saw her, his eyes went dark with appreciation. You look beautiful, he said quietly. You clean up okay yourself? He offered his arm. Ready to convince a room full of skeptics? We're madly in love? As ready as I'll ever be. They descended to the party like performers taking the stage. Derek's hand never left her waist, warm and possessive. He introduced her to board members and investors, his pride in her obvious and probably not entirely faked. Asked one elderly board member, Samuel Patterson. Charity auction, they said simultaneously, then smiled at each other. She outbid me on a vintage guitar, Derek added smoothly. I was annoyed until I saw who'd beaten me. And then, Samuel prompted. Then I asked her to coffee to negotiate shared custody of the guitar. Natalie laughed. He's still trying to get visitation rights. It's a 1959 Gibson Les Paul, Derek protested. I have rights. The group laughed, and Natalie realized with surprise that she was enjoying herself. Derek made this easy, covering for her hesitations, making her look good. During dinner, his hand rested on her thigh under the table, casual and intimate. When she reached for her water, he handed it to her before she could ask. They moved around each other like couples do, anticipating needs, sharing private smiles. It felt real. Too real. The late-night confession back in their suite. Natalie collapsed on the couch, kicking off her heels. That was exhausting. You were perfect. Derek loosened his tie, shrugging out of his jacket. Samuel Patterson loved you. He's been the biggest skeptic about my personal life. Happy to help your corporate image. She meant it sarcastically. But it came out sad. Derek sat next to her, close enough that their shoulders touched. That's not why I asked you here, no? No, he turned to face her. Somewhere between your panic hug and tonight, this stopped being just about fixing a lie. Natalie's breath caught. Derek, I know we have rules. No real feelings, strictly business, temporary arrangement. His hand came up to cup her cheek. But I'm terrible at following. Rules I don't believe in anymore.
This is
Complicated. Everything worth having is complicated. We barely know each other. Then let's change that. His thumb brushed her bottom lip. Stay with me after this weekend. Not fake, real. Let's see where this goes. Natalie's heart hammered. Every logical part of her brain screamed that this was crazy. You didn't fall for someone you'd known less than a week. You didn't turn fake relationships into real ones. But when had she ever made logical choices? Okay, she whispered. Real. Derek's smile was brilliant and genuine and completely devastating. He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. His lips met hers softly at first, testing, questioning. Then Natalie's hands slid into his hair, and the kiss deepened. Became urgent and desperate, and absolutely nothing like pretending. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Derek rested his forehead against hers. So that happened, Natalie said. That definitely happened. What now? Now, Derek said, we go to bed, together, and tomorrow, we figure out the rest. They got ready in comfortable silence, the tension between them electric but not uncomfortable. When they climbed into bed, Derek pulled Natalie against him, her back to his chest, his arms secure around her waist. This okay? He murmured against her hair. More than okay. She fell asleep listening to his heartbeat, feeling safer than she had in years, and wondering how a desperate lie had turned into something that felt remarkably like falling in love. Outside their window, someone in the darkness lowered a camera, a satisfied smile crossing their face. The photos of Derek and Natalie, his kissing would be worth a fortune, and tomorrow's confrontation would be even better. Morning after Natalie woke, wrapped in warmth in the cedar, scent of Derek's cologne. His arm was still around her waist, his breathing slow and steady against her neck. For a moment, she let herself enjoy it. This peaceful morning with a man who made her feel both excited and safe. Then reality crashed in. They'd kissed last night, agreed to make this real. She'd fallen asleep in his arms like this was normal, like they weren't in the middle of an elaborate lie that could explode at any moment. You're thinking too loud, Derek murmured, his voice rough with sleep. Sorry. Just processing. He pulled her closer. Any regrets? About last night? No. She turned to face him. His hair was messy, his eyes still sleepy, and he looked younger and less guarded than she'd ever seen him. You, not even a little. He kissed her forehead. Though we should probably get up. Morning yoga session starts in an hour. Morning yoga? Corporate team building. It's mandatory, Natalie groaned. I hate yoga. So do I. We'll suffer together. We got ready side by side. The domesticity of it, both strange and natural. Derek had to help her zip her dress, his fingers lingering on her bare back in a way that made her skin tingle. Tonight, he said softly, after all the corporate nonsense, we're going to talk. Really talk. About what this means. I'd like that. The anonymous message breakfast was a buffet affair on the terrace. Natalie was loading her plate with fruit when her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. The message was a photo of her and Derek kissing last night through their suite window. Below it, beautiful shot. Wonder what the board would think if they knew this marriage was fake. Meet me at the boathouse in 20 minutes. Come alone. Natalie's appetite vanished. Her hands shook as she stared at the screen. What's wrong? Derek appeared at her elbow, concern etching his features. She showed him the message. His jaw went tight, eyes flashing with anger. Don't go, he said immediately. Have to. If we don't deal with this, they'll release everything. Then I'm coming with you, they said alone. I don't care what they said. Derek took her hand. We're in this together, remember? The boathouse sat at the far end of the property, away from the main buildings. As they approached, Natalie's nerves ratcheted higher. Who was doing this? And why? The door was ajar. Derek pushed it open slowly. his body slightly in front of Natalie's in an instinctively protective stance. Inside. Someone sat on a bench facing the water. When they turned, Natalie's world tilted. Brandon? Her ex-fiancé stood, looking uncomfortable but determined. Hey Nat, thanks for coming. Derek's entire body went rigid. You're behind the blackmail. I prefer to call it investigating the truth. Brandon pulled out his phone. You two aren't really married. There's no marriage license, no record anywhere. I had it checked. The confrontation, you hired someone to follow us? Natalie's voice rose. To take photos through our window? I needed to know if you were actually happy or just trying to make me jealous. Jealous? She stared at him. You ended our engagement. You moved on. What gives you the right to investigate my life? Because I made a mistake. Okay? Brandon ran a hand through his hair. Breaking up with you was the biggest mistake I've ever made. And seeing you with him, looking so happy, it made me realize what I lost. Derek stepped forward, his voice dangerously quiet. So your solution was blackmail? I'm trying to save her from making a mistake. This whole marriage is fake. She deserves better than a lie. You're right, Natalie said, surprising both men. I do deserve better than a lie. She looked at Derek, then back at Brandon. The marriage started as fake. I panicked when I saw you at the gala, said something stupid, and Derek was kind enough to play along. Brandon's face lit up with vindication. I knew it. But, Natalie continued, her voice stronger, somewhere between that night and now it stopped being fake. At least for me. Derek's hand found hers, squeezing gently. The certificate doesn't exist yet because we've been too busy actually getting to know each other. Too busy falling for each other for real? She met Brandon's eyes. You want to know if I'm trying to make you jealous? I'm not. I don't think about you at all anymore. I'm too busy thinking about Derek. About how he makes me laugh, how he listens when I talk, how he makes me feel like I matter. Natalie, Brandon started, no, you don't get to do this. You don't get to show up 2 years later and tell me I'm making a mistake. You made your choice. I'm making mine. The public revealed this is touching, said a new voice from the doorway. Amber stood there, her phone raised, filming. But you just admitted on camera that the marriage is fake. Natalie's stomach dropped. How long had she been there? I'm sending this to every gossip site in New York, Amber continued, tapping her screen. Derek Hamilton's fake marriage exposed by his wife's confession? This is gold. Why? Derek's voice was ice. What do you get out of this? Entertainment clicks. Maybe a little revenge for Brandon. She smiled at him. You've been moping about your ex for months, baby. I'm doing us both a favor. I never asked you to do this, Brandon protested. But he didn't sound convincing. Derek pulled out his phone. Grace, I need you to prepare a statement. We're getting ahead of this. He looked at Natalie. Together? She nodded. Together. Within an hour, they'd gathered the board members and investors in the resort's conference room. Amber's video was already making the rounds on social media. Speculation wild and damaging. Derek stood at the head of the table, Natalie beside him. His hand held hers tightly. I'm sure you've all seen the video by now, Derek began, and I want to address it directly. Yes, Natalie and I initially lied about being married. Murmurs rippled through the room. It was impulsive and not well thought out. But what started as a lie became something real very quickly. He looked at Natalie. I've spent my entire adult life focused on business, on building this company, on proving myself. I never made room for personal connections because I was afraid they'd make me weak or distracted. He turned back to the board. Natalie showed me that connection doesn't make you weak. It makes you stronger, braver. She took a risk on a stranger at a gala, and I took a risk by going along with it. And now we're taking the biggest risk of all by choosing to make this real. So you're actually getting married? Samuel Patterson asked. If she'll have me, Derek said, turning fully to Natalie. I know this isn't romantic. I know we've done everything backward and upside down. But somewhere between your panic hug and right now, I fell completely in love with you. Natalie's eyes filled with tears. You love me? Terrifyingly so. He smiled that devastating smile. I love your courage and your laugh and the way you call me out when I'm being too controlling. I love that you take risks even when they scare you. I love you, Natalie Brooks. For real this time? Well, I love you too, she whispered. Even though you're brooding and billionaire-ish? He laughed, pulling her close. Is that a yes to making this official? That's a yes to everything. Derek kissed her in front of the entire board, and this time there was no pretending, no performance. Just two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely way, choosing to be brave together. The room erupted in applause. Samuel Patterson stood. Well, that was quite a show. And frankly, Hamilton, that's the most human I've seen you in 10 years. The merger approval just got a lot easier. 6 months later, the actual wedding was small, just close friends and family at Derek's Connecticut estate. Riley was Natalie's maid of honor. Grace stood up for Derek. Having become one of Natalie's closest friends over the past months, Brandon had sent a card with a simple apology. Natalie threw it away without reading the whole thing. Some chapters deserved to stay closed, as they exchanged real vows in front of people who actually mattered. Natalie thought about that night at the gala. How a moment of panic had led to the greatest adventure of her life. I promise to love you, Derek said, slipping a ring onto her finger. Even when you make impulsive decisions that turn both our lives upside down. I promise to love you, Natalie replied. Even when you try to turn spontaneous moments into contracted agreements. I promise to be your partner, they said together. In all the real and messy and beautiful moments ahead, when they kissed. It felt like coming home. At the reception, Riley cornered Natalie at the bar. So, fake marriage turned real? I'm taking full credit for dragging you to that gala. You had no idea this would happen. But I had hope. Riley clinked her champagne glass against Natalie's. You deserved someone who sees how amazing you are. I'm glad you found him. Derek appeared, sliding an arm around Natalie's waist. Mind if I steal my wife for a dance? Your real wife, Riley corrected with a grin. My real wife, Derek agreed, looking at Natalie with such open love that her breath caught. On the dance floor, wrapped in his arms, swaying to music that seemed made just for them. Natalie thought about how grateful she was for that impulsive hug. What are you thinking? Derek murmured against her hair. That I'd do it all again. Every chaotic, complicated, ridiculous moment. Even the blackmail. He pulled back to look at her. You know, Brandon tried to contact me last week. Wanted to apologize in person. What did you say? I told him I appreciated the apology, but that particular chapter was closed. We're writing our own story now. I like our story, so do I. Derek kissed her forehead. Though maybe for our next adventure, we could try planning things in advance. Where's the fun in that? You're going to give me gray hair. You'll look distinguished. I already look distinguished. And modest. Don't forget modest. He laughed, spinning her around the dance floor. Other couples joined them, but Natalie only had eyes for Derek. For the man who'd taken a risk on a stranger and found his future. Later, as they left the reception in a shower of rose petals and cheers, Natalie caught her reflection in a window. She wore a real wedding dress this time, carried real flowers, and wore a real wedding ring from a man who really loved her. Sometimes, the best things in life came from the most impulsive decisions. Sometimes you had to hug a stranger to find your forever. And sometimes fake marriages turned into the realest love stories of all. As Derek helped her into their car, decorated with just married signs that were actually true this time, he kissed her once more. Ready for the rest of our lives, Mrs. Hamilton. Ready for everything, Mr. Hamilton? And she meant it. Every word.